Hello and welcome. Hey, it's the Genesee County Compassion Club show. How's everyone today? It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Glad to be back at the studio, allpointstv.com. How's everyone doing? Got John back here making it happen.
Yeah, it's doing it. The weather's great.
You liking this weather?
Yeah,
John?
I like it, except for I know I was probably going to get hit with something down the road, and I'm going to be pissed off. And it is February, so it can't be
February 22nd, 60, 61, 62 degrees. Unbelievable. Just I've never been a proponent of global warming, but this is kind of hard to deny, I guess. Good grief. Ugh. I don't like it, man. It's going to get cold again. Hopefully it doesn't ruin all of the fruit trees and all the flowers and everything else. But we'll have to see. I mean, this is where we're at today. Quit spraying chemtrails. What the fuck?
I noticed that. I do notice that a lot. I'm 53, so I used to see the occasional, trail left behind for a jet, but it just seems like they're skywriting or something.
They all have trails now.
Yeah, I mean, they all do. I mean, it's like, so I don't know. I mean, there might be something to it,
I don't know. But definitely things have changed. Things are changing, and it can be scary, or maybe you love it, whatever. I mean, I've heard people say, well, Michigan's going to turn into Florida, and Florida's going to turn into Michigan. I don't know. The earth goes through changes. That's what I think. But anyways, everybody's entitled to their opinion and scientific.
It was colder when propaganda. I was a kid. Say 53. I'm quite a bit older than you, and so I remember when it was when we got cold. It usually stayed cold until about maybe late February, early March, and then sometimes you could have a change, and March would actually come in like a lion. It would be horrific. It'd get dumped a lot of snow and get cold, and then you'd have a brief free pass. And I've seen it all the way up to May, though, being the snow dumped on us.
Wasn't it supposed to be in like a lion, out like a lamb?
Yeah, that's the old expression, and that could be accurate. I mean, that could be, but
that's March, John. We're in February.
Yeah, we're not that far away from March, though.
It sure doesn't feel like it. That's for sure. So, hey, I hope everybody had a good Valentine's Day last week, right? Good President's Day. Everybody celebrate President's Day. Did you celebrate President's Day, John? Who's your favorite president?
Actually, I'm hard pressed to put it, because there's some that's got good attributes. But I personally, actually, for a person who's from a working class background, and then it takes like a gun being held in my head to admit this, Truman actually fits the bill being more one of us than 98% of the rest of them.
Oh, yeah?
Because, I mean, he actually, it was a failed haberdasher. He had other business ventures that failed. He basically wasn't intended to be the president. The only reason why he got it is because of the death of FDR. FDR didn't like him. And so, I mean, he was a Democrat. He also got us into Korea. But, and my dad hated him for that because my dad had to go to Korea. Didn't know where the hell Korea was. But, I mean, anyway, it's just an average common person. He embodies that, anybody can become the president. Well, unfortunately, I don't think that's a comforting thought, but he actually embodied that more than anybody else.
So Truman's your pick, huh?
Yeah, as an average individual coming up out of the ranks and actually knew what they had to deal with. He actually had when he moved back from after being the president, he actually drove him. So he packed his own car up and drove him and his wife back to Missouri, and he basically was pretty much destitute. I mean, he really, by comparison to these other yahoos. Yeah. So he didn't have a lot of personal wealth.
He didn't have the golden parachute.
No, he was like, so as a person of the people, I would say he was far more connected to that than anybody else.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, John's quite the historian. I always like to pick his brain. Hope everybody enjoyed their President's Day this last Monday. Usually it's a good skiing holiday, but of course that was ruined by the weather, so we'll move on. All right, I digress. Okay, we're going to talk about other stuff here. We got the Compassion Club. What's happening to everybody down at the Compassion Club? How you guys doing? We got the Soup Kitchen coming up this Friday. Hope you guys can participate. Hope you can be there if you can. We'll be serving up food at the North End Charities this Friday in the afternoon. If you can get up there, it'd be about 2 o'clock, and then we serve at 4. All right, so don't forget about that. We got some news I want to talk about, some weed in the news. It's a busy time for weed, always is. And got some stories I want to share with you. So, top story I saw on the news today is kind of interesting. It says America is going to be having a $24 billion industry in the marijuana business by 2025. So, John, you're just talking about your age. I know the older I get, the faster time flies. And I can tell you 2025 is not that far away. It seems like that's a long ways away. It's not. $24 billion industry. That's huge. I guess Colorado's already had over $1 billion in their industry for that state alone. So definitely big business. Definitely things going to be continuing to change. We're going to talk about those changes on today's show. So, got a lot of different coverage is from various areas across the country. We're going to be talking about a lot of different states, actually. And it's kind of interesting to see how this development continues to take place across the country in regards to marijuana. Of course, we have medical marijuana becoming more prevalent, and it is continuing to advance and become more available. However, it continues to be done so on a very limited basis. So this is kind of interesting, the different perspectives that our lawmakers take on this. What's going to be good for their communities, what's going to be good for the patients as they weigh out the different options and make their decisions. So it is interesting to watch them. Speaking of Colorado, it was interesting. I was reading an article about the state to the south of Colorado. Does anybody know what that is? There's a few of them. The one I'm mentioning is New Mexico. So they butt right up to each other. And a lot of folks in New Mexico, yes, they have medical marijuana in New Mexico. It's a limited program. But Colorado has marijuana for everyone. It's legal. And the big thing is people from New Mexico are going to Colorado. New Mexico is missing out on it. So actually one of the stories we're talking about today was New Mexico. Their legislature is considering legalization for recreational purposes. So they already have medical marijuana. Now they're looking at taking the next step. And the big thing, the big incentive for them is money. They're looking at people going across the border. They're looking at some of these small, previously almost next to nothing ghost towns in Colorado that bordered New Mexico or do border New Mexico. And they're watching them become the latest boom towns as people flocking across the border, getting their marijuana, and of course paying taxes, paying an out-of-state tax fee, that revenue being collected, distributed back into the communities. Of course, all the business growth that comes from it. It's undeniable. And New Mexico's sitting there watching it happen and going, we want some of that. So this is one of the things we're seeing in regards to the advancement of marijuana. Of course, this is on a recreational level, and we're seeing the main component or proponent be money, as it often is. So, these states are wanting to collect, wanting to get in on the business, and it's kind of interesting. Who's going to be last? I think that's the question. We got a lot of who's going to be next. There's states across the country that have legislation, for marijuana, whether it be for medical, whether it be for recreational. But who's going to be last? Who's going to be the last state to wake up and realize the truth? Some say, according to this article I was just reading here, Alabama, maybe. Probably one of the states to the south seems to be the biggest speculation. And it's kind of interesting. One of the states to the north, New Hampshire, in fact, was just talking about the same thing that we were talking about with New Mexico. They are one of the last states there to have recreational marijuana be not yet available. You have Vermont, it's available. New Hampshire, available. Maine, available. And New Hampshire is sitting right there in the middle going, we're missing out on the money. What's going on? So they're talking about legalizing it for recreational purposes as well. And the interesting thing I wanted to bring up is that one of their congressmen, in introducing his bill, said, well, we don't want to become the Mississippi of the North. So we talk about these poor southern states being a little slow, but being a little bit behind, being a little reluctant to conform or to progress. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Alabama or Georgia or one of these other ones. I don't want to pick on them, but they need to step up. The bottom line is you have states that are still completely 100% illegal, no medical purpose at all for marijuana, and there's a lot of folks in those states that are suffering and could benefit from the use of it, and they're watching shows on CNN, they're seeing what's happening across the country, and some of these are dire situations, and there could be potentially thousands in each state. So as we see these states hold back for whatever reason, whether it be social pressure or whatever, maybe they're still hooked up on old propaganda lies. A lot of them are, unfortunately. And what we need to have is progression, and we need to have compassion. I think that's the most important thing. When we look at the reality of what medical marijuana does, it's far outweighs the negatives, if there are any at all. The positives are just overwhelming. The evidence is it's right in front of you. You can't deny it. So hopefully these states will step up.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't want to, I won't go into picking on Alabama. So
yeah, I have a friend that lives down there, and she says she likes smoking weed, but it's like she says it's here it's more casual, and there it's more intense. They got to be more clandestine about it. They got to and she's it's really scary because they're so zealous down there about enforcing laws against it. So
yeah, and I guess what I'm thinking of is the family with the epileptic child, the elderly senior that has MS, uncontrollable seizures, things like this. These people should have access to this medication. It's proven to work. They're seeing it happen on TV every night. They're watching CNN or whatever it is, and they're denied. They can't have it. They can't get it. And if they do, they're a criminal. And that just seems preposterous in today's day and age. So, all right, I'm moving on here. Another state I wanted to talk about, it is south, but not that far south, is Missouri. Missouri is one of those states that has passed one of these CBD oil type legislation bills. So they said, well, we're not setting up a framework for distribution. We're not setting up infrastructure for production. We're simply just passing a law that says, doctors can prescribe or recommend this CBD oil to select patients that are suffering from seizures, so on and so forth. But the problem is that the doctors are scared of it. They don't know where they're going to tell their patient to go get it. They know that it is still illegal on a federal level, so they don't want to risk their license. A lot of the same things that we've seen happen here in Michigan. But you got to realize that in Michigan, we have had a greater access available to the patients here than what Missouri has done for their citizens. Theirs is much more limited. And so the doctors are even more reluctant. And they're not seeing clinics pop up specifically for marijuana like you have in other states that have passed medical marijuana. That's just not happening. So unfortunately right now in Missouri, there's approximately only 66 patients that have received a recommendation. Now, how many of those have actually received medication, I can't tell you. But the number is very low. And obviously, potentially thousands of people in the state of Missouri that could use this. But the doctors aren't even signing off on it, even though there's a law that's been passed in their state telling them it's okay to do so. So, that shows we need to have change on a federal level so that these doctors can do their jobs wholeheartedly and not have to hold back, worried about whether they're going to lose their job or be prosecuted or something like that.
I like to ask the critics, so what would it take to give them what they consider substantial enough evidence enough to be considered legitimate, to offer up the legitimacy for marijuana being considered a drug, for treatment of ailments and illnesses. I'd like to see what they'd accept, because
the fact remains is there's quite a few MDs out there and DOs as well that unless a medication has been tested and approved by the FDA, it is not going to be on their list of medicines that they'll prescribe. So to that particular type of professional, they have a standard set in their own opinion that unless someone has met that standard, unless a procedure or a medication has met that degree, it will not be one of the things that they'll even consider or talk about. And that type of closed-mindedness, I think, doesn't bode very well when we're trying to look at the overall health and improvement of a patient, especially when the current prescribed methods aren't working. I think that they should open their minds a little bit. However, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and of course, people are entitled to go to their doctor of their choosing. You shouldn't have to be stuck with one particular physician. If they're closed-minded and not willing to consider other types of treatments, maybe that's not the right doctor for you, simply put.
I just don't understand that part too. It's like so many doctors out there who are on board. Why can't they actually? I think they should. I'd like to sit down and have people, for the club. Maybe people member of the club sit down and actually discuss that. And, record their conversation with critics or cynics about this. Because I think their opposition would have to be basically peeled away eventually.
Sure,
I really do.
Yeah, a lot of doctors would simply say that information is simply anecdotal, and so it can only weigh out to a certain amount of credibility. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we can listen to the patients and understand and learn from them based on what they're telling us. I don't think it all has to be a double-blind placebo test and whatnot. I don't think that's necessarily the only way to do things. But talking about this type of legislation, I think, is something that we can do something about immediately, because these senators and representatives that are working on these types of bills, I think they have to open their minds up as well and understand that you can't just say, well, something is now available without making a means to make it available, such as in these CBD type only bills. And another one, this is the same thing. Kansas Senate committee just got done approving a bill for what they called hemp oil. So again, clearly more confusion on lawmakers' parts, not understanding what the product is, where it comes from, how it's developed, how it's procured, and really not taking the time to do so either. There's many people that are pushing into Kansas legislature saying, hey, we need a more expansive bill, we need to have more accessibility, so on and so forth. But the lawmakers push back and they say, look, we don't have time for all of that. It's too much to wrap our heads around. There's too many negatives, that could get thrown in our way. Let's just get this bill passed through first, and then we'll work on the next thing. But the problem is that these particular types of bills don't help anyone. For example, the hemp oil bill. How is someone in Kansas supposed to get hemp oil when they don't have the necessary means to produce a plant? It's just simply silly. Indiana, another legislature, another state, same thing. Their House committee, just like our House here in the Michigan, just passed same thing, CBD oil only bill, MJ, for basically for seizures, and they're doing it for the right reasons, but again, they're not taking the whole thing into understanding, and it just seems really quite silly. So a knee-jerk reaction, if you will. Thankfully, we didn't have it happen here in Michigan. All right, we had our own thing happen. We sure did, and I want to talk about that a little bit on the show this week. All right, so let's move on here. We've got it out of the rest of the country. I think I covered everybody. Yeah, good enough. This here I wanted to talk about. LARA, our licensing and regulation department here in Michigan, which issues out the licenses for medical marijuana here in Michigan. They are the department responsible for establishing the new medical marijuana system that will be coming out probably next year sometime. And they are currently working with the laws that were passed this last year, and they're developing the system for commercialized dispensaries, production centers, licensing, testing, transportation, so on and so forth. They're putting all of this together, and I wanted to share this with you. I thought this was interesting. LARA is seeking input from stakeholders. Whoever those stakeholders may be, I don't know. All right, I'm not a stakeholder myself, I can tell you that, or at least I haven't been recognized as a stakeholder. I certainly feel like I have a stake in this. I think you all have a stake in it as well. So I'm a little bit offended that they didn't reach out to all of us. However, they did reach out to said stakeholders, whoever they may be, on some critical issues that they were looking for input for. And I want to share with you what they were, because I thought this was interesting. So in regards to the new bills that were passed this last December, LARA is seeking information in how they should structure these new programs, these new entities. And I'm just going to go through the list of questions for you. All right. Question number one that LARA is asking is, should an entity be permitted to have more than one grow license at a single location? All right. That's question number one. Question number two, should an entity be permitted to have more than one level of grow license at a single location? If you remember reading through the law, there was 3 different classes of growing, A, B, and C. And so this is saying, should they be allowed to have A and B also at the same location? Question number 3, should multiple licenses issued at a single location be restricted to Class C grow licenses only? All right. Number 4, should the licensed growers, processors, and provisioning centers be allowed to apply for multiple licenses? If you remember when we first went through these bills, there was a lot of talk about whether or not a testing facility could own a transport facility, or if a marijuana production facility could also own a marijuana distribution facility. And so it looks like LARA is asking these questions to stakeholders to find out what would be the best method. Question number 5, should a demonstrated ability to sell inventory be required as a prerequisite to issuing additional licenses at a single location? If so, what percentage of inventory over how long of a period? Interesting question. Should different entities operating at the same location be required to have common ownership interest? All right, question number 7. A few other states, such as Colorado, allow growers and processors to operate at the same location and allow license stacking. Should licensed growers and processors be allowed to operate at the same location? Question number 8. There has been some mention of possible safety and security concerns if licensed growers, processors, and provisioning centers are all operating at the same location, such as one building. Should growers, processors, and provisioning centers be allowed to operate at the same location? So lots of questions about how they should set up locations, who should be licensed, who should be connected, can you have multiple licenses? If you have a license, what does it take to apply for another license? So it looks like they're looking at this program from a very expandable platform, and I think it's important and good that our state is in fact reaching out to stakeholders and asking for input. I don't know who these people are, and so I can't tell you exactly what their motives may be or what their questions or what their answers to these questions may be. However, I think it's good at least that our state's reaching out and asking and not just trying to do it all on their own. I think it would have been a little bit better if they'd have done that in the process of passing the law, but at least they're doing so in the implementation of it. So that's kind of a good thing. All right, so with that in mind, you can see that Lara is right now still in the throes of seeking information on how to establish, how to set up, and direct this new program that they are now responsible for. This input that they are seeking, they are asking that it was due back from said stakeholders, due back by February 28th this month. So they are moving forward, and as I get more information about Lara and their progression and what they've done, definitely be glad to share it with you on the program here. At this time, that's all I've got. That's Lara. They're doing their thing. It's the state running the show, and we're going to have to see how this plays out. So it's kind of interesting to watch. There was another story I wanted to share with you before we take off here. This was from a city right here in Michigan, a little town called Buchanan. Anybody know where Buchanan's at? I think it's in Michigan. No, it is a small town, basically. But what they are doing right now is they're looking at regulating and basically passing an ordinance for a medical marijuana licensed facility. They didn't get too specific on what type of facility it was. And I did see that there were some other towns in Michigan doing the same thing. I believe right here in Genesee County, Montrose is looking at doing the same type of thing. To me, that's sort of interesting, and I would caution townships from going further at this point. The reason being is because obviously, like I just shared with you, Lara is still working on setting up the department's rules and guidelines, and we don't yet know how things can be done, let alone how a community should regulate those things. And Buchanan, the reason I brought that up is because that's basically where they were at. They were seeking input from their citizens. And I don't know, maybe we've got some members in the club from Buchanan. So if you are, get a hold of your city council or attend a meeting. You might find out some important information. But yes, Buchanan was looking at possibly changing their ordinance down there to allow or to not allow potentially any licensed marijuana facilities within their city. And they had input taken, like I said, but they did not yet come up with a decision. And I think the city of Montrose here in Genesee County was doing the same exact process and potentially looking at licensing and creating an ordinance for that purpose. So I think that's all good and positive, just might potentially be jumping the gun. We don't know yet exactly what the parameters are of this law yet because the department hasn't decided yet. So that's the bottom line. A lot of people want to know what's going on with the new law. Well, the law doesn't even know what's going on with the law yet. So, all right. Well, that's what I've got for you guys this week. Want to share with you those stories. Definitely appreciate everybody being down at the club, making it happen there every day. It's awesome. We've got some beautiful, wonderful, exciting things coming up soon. I'd like to share those with you as soon as we can. One thing I do want to mention is our upcoming 420 party. I know this warm weather makes me think about it, even though it's premature. I still get excited about the 420 party every time it gets warm and springy out. So, but at any rate, if you're thinking spring, now might be the time to start popping some beans for your outdoors. Might be the time to start selecting some clones. Think about your garden. I know I'm worried about my fruit trees every day as I'm watching them start to bud, and I know it's too early, but think about your cannabis garden too for you outdoor gardeners out there. Now's the time. Start making those selections, maybe get some new seeds, whatever it is you're looking for, but it's time. The spring is coming. It's not here yet, but it's coming soon. So I'm going to get back outside and enjoy this wonderful day. I hope you guys do too. Get a chance to get out there and enjoy 61 degrees in February. It's insane. But hey, we might as well enjoy it since it's here, right? So thanks for joining me on this week's podcast. I appreciate it. This is the Genesee County Compassion Club show, and you're watching it on allpointstv.com. Thanks a lot. Bye.